Well, hello, everybody. I'm Marilyn Hawes with Unprecedented TV and my show, Heart and Soul. And you will find us on YouTube if you put Unprecedented TV in. I'm also CEO of Freedom from Abuse, which is a charity seeking to prevent child abuse and any sort of abuse, actually, because there's just far too much of it in society and it's very toxic. For Heart and Soul, I am inviting anyone who's got a lived experience or a story to tell or an issue that you think needs more oxygen as a guest to come on my show. So please, if you feel like, oh, she hasn't rung me, please call Unprecedented. Together we will discuss the issues from which I think all too often people turn away and they actually choose to ignore other people's reality. And as I say, we need to open hearts and minds and soul and give it more oxygen. So basically, we're going to kick the elephant out of the room. And this morning, I cannot tell you how thrilled I am to have the lovely, the work he does is amazing, Mark Brooks OBE, Chairman of Mankind. And welcome, Mark. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marilyn. It's a real honour. The honour is all mine.
I don't think so. I'm a nobody, you're somebody. I mean, you've got an OBE, which we will talk about in a minute. But can you tell me, because I know people are very interested in how charities begin. How did you get involved with Mankind?
Well, I got involved with Mankind. I mean, we're 25 this year, actually. We became a registered charity in 2001. And it was set up before my time, but only by about 5-6 years. So based in Taunton in Somerset, and you can tell from my accent, Marilyn, I'm a Southeast Londoner and still here. But because I'm the chair of the board, I have a slightly different role. So I don't run the charity on a day-to-day basis, but I have, if you like, the overall responsibility for the charity. And it was set up in Taunton because there was a number of men and women who had been affected by domestic abuse. The men because they'd been victims themselves, but also the women because they'd had sons or brothers who had been victims of domestic abuse. And they kind of coalesced around Taunton. There'd been Erin Pizzey had actually given a big talk in Taunton about fathers and the plight of fathers and around domestic abuse, including men. And a lot of the people there coalesced and set the charity up. I came on board about 5 years after that, primarily because I'd been a local elected councillor. And one of my constituents had been a male victim of domestic abuse. He'd lived in a council house with his 2 children, or a council flat with his 2 children. And his wife was abusive. She'd had a police caution as well, so it's proven. But the council wouldn't rehouse him and the 2 children because they couldn't get their head round the fact that a male could be a victim of domestic abuse. Now, I'm talking about 99, 2000 here, so this is some time ago. Anyway, I stopped being a counsellor. I didn't lose. I decided, it was becoming quite an issue with my business, my career, because it's quite time consuming. It's very rewarding, but it's time consuming. And then I felt a few years later that I wanted to do some voluntary work, especially because, my background is communications, policy and marketing. And I basically wanted to do give something back. And then I remembered this issue, went online, typed in male victims of domestic abuse and up this charity. So I volunteered to do their communications and marketing. And then 6 months later, they asked me to be the chair. So that's the kind of long journey, and it's been extremely rewarding and also eye-opening as well.
Well, I find the same because my charity is, as I've just announced it, is like, it is rewarding when you can, be an advocate for someone and just be by their side, basically. I mean, I think to signpost people to the right place is an incredible thing. And you are a very busy boy because this morning, I got up ridiculously early this morning and someone cancelled an appointment. So, but yes, you've got this OBE, if I'm not surprised. And when was the OBE? Because I went on your website and I went on Mankind's website, and my goodness me, you're all over the place. You're very busy.
Yeah, exactly. All over the place in a good way.
Yeah, absolutely.
Albeit,
when have the OBE?
Yeah, so I got that in 2019 for my work in domestic abuse, and I think where it came about was because I'm kind of things a big kind of structural national level, as well as obviously making sure things are delivered locally. What I could see when I became the chair was the fact that there wasn't that many services available for men, even though legally they had to be. So under the law, you can't, under the Sex Discrimination Act back in the 70s, and then its modern version, the Equality Act, you can't discriminate against somebody because of their sex. And that includes, especially for public bodies, their service delivery. And so what we were finding was that there was lots of contracts that were being let by local councils who have the responsibility to provide a domestic abuse service for their local community, but it was only for women. So I started writing letters to leaders of councils, because if you write to council officers, they just fob you off. But if you write to leaders of the council, who are obviously democratically elected to run the council, they are the head honcho, obviously male or female, but they're the person whose neck is on the line. So don't write to the council officers, write to the councillors. And so I'd write to them and I'd say, well, you're breaching the law. But I'd say it in a very positive way, and how can we help to help you? So I wasn't sending out press releases saying they're breaching the law, albeit on occasion I did later down the line when they wouldn't take notice of the things we were saying. So I think where the OBE came from was myself, but part of the charity created a landscape in the UK where there is now services available for male victims in every part of the UK. Good. As well as making sure that governments are doing as much as they can for male victims, which they're not, but which we'll come on to, I'm sure. But also talking to the media, talking to conferences, and actually being at the vanguard of this, because nobody else was really talking about these issues.
No, they're not.
In a public forum, and also being slightly brave about it. I mean, I'm from Southeast London, as I mentioned, and we have an anti-establishment streak, or certainly maybe just me, but it's like, we're in a good way in terms of actually saying, well, there's a problem here. The establishment is saying, ignoring it. Well, that I don't go away.
No, I'm the same. I'm the same.
In a good way, in a positive.
Yeah, it's all for the right reasons.
Absolutely.
Because if you're passionate about something, you're going to keep clicking on that door until someone opens it. Because I'm pleased to hear you say that probably in the last 5 years, male victims are better supported. Because when I first started dabbling in the victims of male abuse, it was shocking, absolutely shocking. They were just completely isolated and abandoned. So you would generally say then they are much better supported now.
Yeah, but there's miles and miles to go. I mean, I think one of the issues is that they're better supported once they're in the system.
Yes,
for want of a better word, because there are all of these domestic abuse services available for men, and basically what happens is the council will commission a domestic abuse service. But part of that service's remit is to make sure that they're supporting male victims. So they're not necessarily specialist male services. They're just overarching services, but they will support men and are public about it. And and for us, I think that's the way to go. I think I work with a lot of colleagues in the sexual violence arena, and basically they have in the male sexual violence, sexual abuse area, and they have very distinct services for men, but it's horses for courses. And also there just isn't enough men or women prepared and also have the acumen and skill and the finance to actually set up a parallel or separate domestic abuse service for men. And so you have to accept the world as it is. So it's better to have overarching services supporting male victims than actually be overly precious and have none at all. But the conundrum is that not enough men are actually getting signposted or referred or finding out about these services that exist. And we're still finding GPs not recognizing domestic abuse in men. We're still seeing too many police officers, not as many as we used to, turning up, assuming that the male is the perpetrator and the woman is the victim, even when it's the man who's actually contacted the police. And we're also seeing lots of missed opportunities in homelessness settings, A&E settings, where there's clearly something going on in the lives of men at home, and nobody's asking the questions. Well, so things are better, but we're still miles to go.
This is how I feel, Mark. People are not asking the why. It's a simple question in the English language. People are not in. They don't have an investigative brain. They don't. Yeah. I was one of those innocent little kids that always said, "Why? I want to know why someone is looking like this or behaving like this, or why are they depressed or this." You've got to have that inquiring mind, I think, haven't you? And I'm always pushing on schools. You always have something that's not right with a child. Why? And that's the way you find out, isn't it? And that's the way you learn. Because do you still find? Two things I wanted to ask, because when I was, as I said, doing this about 5 or 7 years ago, how many refuges are there now for men? Because it was pathetically small at one point.
Yeah, so there's about, refuges are always the answer for men when it comes to looking for accommodation, but there's about 400 spaces for men in the UK if they're a victim of domestic abuse. About 120-30 of them are dedicated for men, and the rest are for men or women. And councils do have a statutory duty under kind of homeless acts, housing acts, to house all victims of domestic abuse if they need emergency and longer terms. The technical term is safe accommodation. So some of that could be in refuges, and there is a growing number. London is the worst place for a male victim, full stop, in my opinion. But also there's a lot of what you'd call single units. So there might be just a flat somewhere. Also some other kind of safe accommodation. So single units that could be used that are set aside just for men, or single units where they're basically set aside for men or women. And what I mean by units, like a flat or something like that. So it's always about refuges, it's about safe accommodation is a broader term, but there's still not a lot. And we're still finding men calling our helpline, or other agencies calling our helpline, especially local councils, saying we've got this man who's a victim of domestic abuse. Where can we find some form of safe accommodation? And a lot of the things that we go back to, especially with local councils, is actually, well, it's your responsibility. You shouldn't be ringing us up. We don't run them. We signpost men to them or to the organisations that run them, but we don't run them. So therefore, it's your responsibility. So there is still a big postcode lottery when it comes to safe accommodation support.
Well, 400 spaces is just pathetic, isn't it? It's absolutely pathetic. You need to have at least another couple of noughts at the end of it.
Well, exactly. Especially when men, if they've got children or they've
Yes.
got disabilities, and the big thing is if they've got children, because like a mum, they won't leave an abusive
I know.
household
I
if they
know.
can't take the kids with them.
Yeah. Yeah. And the women
And
are, I mean, I shouldn't say this about my own gender, should I? But I mean, I've seen it myself in courts, how, excuse me, how incredibly manipulative they are, and how very convincing. Well, it's the nature of an abuser, isn't it? You're plausible, they're charming, and they look quite pathetic and vulnerable. And then the child ends up going to the wrong person, which is, I mean, do you still find, because people are still telling me this happens, that a man goes to the police and it is a lottery, it's also who you have on duty at the time, when they've actually been laughed at and got, you let a woman hit you?
yeah, we do get that, but it's occasional now
Good.
rather than the norm. And certainly, yeah, I've been involved nearly 20 years, as I said, and it was the norm 20 years ago,
Yeah.
even 10 years ago. It was not uncommon, but it's uncommon now. And but the thing we always urge, and it's information on our website and our helpline and others, is that if a man goes to the police, take someone with you if you can, but also make sure you got the evidence. Got evidence.
Yes.
We're always talking about chronology,
Yeah.
diary, evidence on phones, etc., because that just makes it, harder for the police to dismiss when you've got that. And the thing is, the police are seeing, police are better because they recognise more widely that it happens to men, but also I think that they've realized that they are seeing, not necessarily in the household but more widely, issues around some women acting violently. So it isn't, when they're thinking, well, okay, there's some issues with women acting violently, why wouldn't that happen outside, inside the home? And actually, the people who are more likely to take a male victim seriously, especially if it's the hands of a woman, are actually female police officers, because they've been in and around perhaps women
Yes.
who have acted in that way, even through school. So I remember one talk I was giving and a discussion, and there was a lady, I think about mid 40s, who said, and these are her words, not mine. And she said, "Girls, we always remember the violent girls in the playground. Don't think some of them changed when they left school."
That's true.
And I remember that, and there was all these nods, and I was, I was almost like, a rarity to be invited into, the woman's world in that respect, because I was the only guy in the room. But it's really fascinating, that
But people
dynamic.
don't change, do they, Mark? People don't change. I was bullied by, I can still remember a girl called Hilary Webster, her name was,
Right.
and I was bullied and pushed and hit around in the playground at school. And when I was like 4, 5 years old, 6 years old, and I am actually frightened of anyone called Hillary. If someone came up now and said, Hillary, you'd see my shoulders go up. It doesn't leave you. And I often say when I'm doing training, that girl will be the same as a woman. They don't change, because the damage to your mindset has happened, hasn't it, in those early years with the trauma. Have you found, and I think I know what the answer is going to be, have you found an increase after COVID, during COVID, around Christmas times? Do you get a spike?
Yes, we do. I mean, we've seen an increase in two areas. I mean, one is around, we do see it after Christmas, after summer holidays, and also coming out of COVID. And I think because I just think COVID's caused wide ranging mental health issues for some people in the population that weren't there before, because so we have seen more of it happening, and we've seen more men come forward. And but the broad issue was, especially coming immediately after COVID, was that COVID made the existing domestic abuse worse,
Yes.
intensified it, because the man, this is also chimes with the experiences of women as well, from what I've read, is that you were stuck with a perpetrator, you had less opportunities to escape, and also some of the things about stereotypes were then used against you, especially if you were having difficulties in the job market, and also basically the security around any family. You know, what type of man are you, not bringing in enough money into the household? You should go out and earn a living. But we also found some stories where some men had called us and others, where basically their partner, female partner, was actually purposely sending them out into dangerous situations in terms of COVID related situations, about infections, just as a way of trying to harm them. I mean, it was utterly bizarre. So we have seen an increase during COVID and coming out, and it happens coming out of Christmas, summer holidays, where you tend to get a man who has had specific time, concentrated time, and then they think enough's enough. Because for a lot of men, going to work is almost like a respite from this. So if you're not at work, that causes an issue. And also, the pressures around Christmas and money and family, etc., can make things worse. What we have seen as well is that this increase in men not only coming forward, but also being recognised. So the government statistics body actually did a review of domestic abuse figures, and they found that their assessment, and there's no criticism of them, had been underplaying the number of male and female victims. So the figures, their assessment, went up from around 750,000 men in England and Wales being a victim of domestic abuse to now being 1.5 million. So, and even that may not be as accurate as it could be, but we've seen this big increase in the recognition of
that's great. So men must be feeling more confident coming forward now then as well. So I mean, what is that ratio? See, I have got this theory that there's not a lot of difference in the numbers between men and women being abused. I have a theory about that. I don't know whether I'm right, but I think it's kept under the covers more with men somehow. Or am I wrong?
I think where there's research, academic research, that suggests it's 50-50.
Yeah, I think so.
And also a lot of the abuse is actually, the technical term, bidirectional, i.e. the man and the woman are abusing each other, i.e. they're as bad as each other, and they're causing abuse to each other. But there's some of that. I mean, again, it's hard to know the figure, but the Office for National Statistics figures, and we tend to use them, show that for every 3 victims of every 3 female victims, there are 2 male victims. So it's about 60-40, and we tend to use that because that's government independent. Well, the ONS is independent of government, but it's the government stats authority. And we tend to use that because it means we focus on discussing the issues rather than actually arguing about the figures, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, I do a course with teenagers because I think this toxicity goes back childhood, teenagers, and they end up being abusive women or men. I think, as I say, I think it's in their personality DNA backpack, if you like. Not born like it, but are because maybe of bad parenting and issues in the early years. But again, with the teenager, I did some research on the very little 1 in 11 against 1 in 10. I think it's 1 in It's so close. It's so close. And I've been in schools where teenage girls have literally got up and said to the boys, and vice versa. In fact, I have more boys coming to see me afterwards than girls. That, you know, oh, now I know what you're doing. Now I know what you're up to. Because I don't think the kids don't understand, which is why teachers in schools shouldn't be teaching it. They don't understand all the finite bits, do they, involved with abuse, you know, like someone's going to your wallet, or the road rage is another sign, isn't it? I mean, it's all, there's so many component parts to it that people aren't aware of. What upsets me, and when I was looking at your website today, I was looking at suicides, because I know how it's the highest killer, isn't it, in society, men under 50 taking their own lives, sadly. And I noticed a dramatic increase from 2020 to the 2021 figures.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, I work, you know, my day job is actually working on men and boys policy in the round. So obviously that covers domestic abuse, but it also covers men's health, and also boys doing well at school and jobs, etc. So a whole wide range of issues. And I've written policy papers for parliamentary groups on male suicide, so far broader than domestic abuse, but domestic abuse is an element. I mean, what we're seeing in terms of suicide more generally is that 14 men a day die by suicide in the UK, and we're at record levels really. It's over 5,000 men.
It's so sad. I read it on, you obviously updated the figure, because I read it on your website this morning, which, you know, 30, I read, but you obviously, it's gone up, 13 men every day, which I thought was also interesting, frightening actually, that it impacts the lives of 135 other people around that one man.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So yeah, that's the thing, Marilyn. I mean, the figures have been going up. Part of that's COVID, part of that's around economic insecurity, but also when it comes to domestic abuse, I mean, what we're seeing is that we've estimated the figures, and we'll do some more work on this, is around 3 to 5 men every week die by suicide due to domestic abuse. And actually a quarter of the suicide, some research has been done, quarter of the suicide homicides, this is governmental research, shows that a quarter of them are male. You know, I think it's higher than that. Primarily because a lot of the men are taking their own lives, and it's not been obvious to anybody that domestic abuse has been a factor in that. But you know, men, especially if they're feeling suicidal because of domestic abuse, because they're feeling embarrassed, there's stigma to it, they think no one will take them seriously, they've lost their sense of purpose, they feel hopeless, useless, all of those issues. And for many men, they see suicide as a rational decision. They don't see it as a clinical or a health problem. They see it as a rational, in their minds, a rational answer to life problems they can't fix. And some of that will be they're a victim of domestic abuse, they can't fix it, they don't think it can be fixed, so they take their own life.
I think also there's that real fear of losing their children. I've seen women in court that have been the perpetrator, and then they accuse the man, the father, of abusing their own children, and then where do you go with that? The woman gets the kids. I mean, it is just awful. I mean, the figure I found from 2020 to 21, there were 204 more suicides, which is significant, isn't it? That's huge. That's huge. But what also I found interesting, I mean, this is 5:30 this morning, Mark. I was going through all this. They put me off my breakfast.
Cheery material.
It's a good job I work in this field, I think. But what amazed me was twice as many come from the northeast And then, and I literally took a photograph of your website, was it, now where was it? 4 times more are in the building trade.
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah, well, this is what we're trying to get to the bottom of. I mean, I think it's because there's more. I mean, I think there's just been the environment of being outside, but outside in all weathers, so it's not just outside. But also, I think that there is there's it's more precarious, the employment. So there's more precarious employment. There's a lot more, especially if you're on big construction projects, living away from home.
Oh yes, of course.
And also, I think there's issues about just perhaps that the culture there is a bit more macho.
Yes.
And actually showing some form of weakness.
Yes.
Is more frowned upon. The other thing is the consequences, especially for older men, because you were right about men under it's the biggest killer of men under 50 in the UK, and the hump is around middle-aged men. So you're looking at probably about 40 to 60. There's a hump, and it gets, the hump is around 45 to 50, but it starts going up. And the thing is, where that interplays with work, especially physical work, is that obviously the older the men get, they may not be physically able to do that work anymore.
Yes.
They might have been injured, or they're just getting old. I mean,
what about long distance lorry drivers? Because I think that's a very and farmers, isn't it? Farmers.
Yeah, exactly. It's that isolation, the lack of people around you, the lack of perhaps camaraderie, and also that lack of sense of belonging. And the problem is that doesn't cause the suicide. It's other issues. So if you've got money problems, if you've got relationship problems, if you've got some form of transition in your life, and you see this with, some men coming out of the armed forces, or some boys, young men going to university, for example. So if you've got these whole range of life problems you can't fix, and on top of that, you're lonely, you're isolated, then that will cause significant problems. And for a lot of men, it's just being around other men and other activities. I mean, I've always said, I haven't got any evidence of this, so it's my kind of gut instinct that things like I felt like Weatherspoons and places like that are real lifesavers for men. I mean, I was stayed in one in this week because some of them got hotels, and I was in Bridgend in South Wales doing some work there, and I left about 8:30. And it was full of men reading the paper or on their own, but having a coffee, not drinking, because that's obviously an issue. But having some breakfast, coffee. And because it's not a cafe where if you've eaten your food, you're kind of expected to go, you can just stay there and have more coffee and what have you, reading the paper. Or some men tend to be older men, just sitting around having conversations, getting out of the house, talking to other men, or just getting out of the house. And I'm thinking, well, actually, that's so good for those men's mental health.
This is where I worry about Rachel Reeves. That's another whole conversation, can't we have, about pubs? You see, I live in a village, but we've got 170 people here and 70 houses, and it's a very elderly population. I think I bring down the average age by about 20 years, I think. But they're not a load of I can't say the word, obviously, off their head, all that, but they do it is like a social club. And I think the pub is the heartbeat of and Weatherspoons, of course, stuff is cheaper, and I think it's terrible that about, it's dreadful. I mean, how many also would you say then, so we talk about suicide, how many men would you say go missing? They literally disappear into the ether, and don't want to be found.
Yeah, I don't. It's a good point. I have to look that up. I don't know, because there's a really great charity that I've applied for jobs to it before, but never got an interview, called Missing Persons.
Yeah, they're brilliant.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Agree.
and I'm fascinated by that, and where they just go missing, and I don't know what the drivers are. I'll be honest, that's going to be a weekend project. Actually, I'm
I
actually going to,
think, I
giving me
think
homework
I
here,
know two
Marilyn.
young men have gone missing, and I don't even know where they are, but the parents have told me. But one had significant issues with a very controlling father,
Yeah,
not violent, but
yeah,
controlling. The boy could never make his own mind up. He wasn't allowed to. And similarly, so with the other one, with a mum. And I hear of other ones along the line. And these people just don't want to be found, do they? They change their name. Maybe they go abroad. And I think that's really hard for, for the people that just don't understand it. I think it's as distressing as suicide, because you don't know, have they gone somewhere and taken their own life?
yeah,
Have
yeah.
they thrown themselves into the river or something? You just don't know, do you? I mean, I mean, changing the subject a bit again now. I picked up, and maybe it's not an expression I've heard before. I ran it past my producer earlier. You mentioned on your website modern masculinity. Can you explain what that is?
Well, that's part of the issue, is that I mean, there's huge debates that's been taking place last year and will continue this year about what masculinity is, and it's really interesting in that there's a lot of debate about is masculinity good? Is it bad? Should men be more like women?
Oh,
Are men defective women? And I've been trying to push back against a lot of that discussion, because it isn't about masculinity as a problem, and because masculinity is also just a set of behaviors
yes,
that society thinks men have, but also men have feminine qualities or behaviors, and also a lot of women have masculine
absolutely.
behaviors. I mean,
Yes,
I've always said that actually the most masculine person, or with the most masculine behaviors, is actually a single mum, because also
yes.
she's got to combine all
I
the
was on my
caring
own with 4
roles,
children. I
but
completely
also
get.
she's got to be out there earning a living
Yes.
and being strong and
Mm,
courageous and
mm, mm,
everything. I said,
mm.
so it's quite a pejorative term, but I kind of like list it around the fact that men want to be of service, they want to be successful, and I'll come on to that because I've been challenged on that. Successful, they want self-respect, they want an element, they want to be self-responsible, and also want this sense of belonging and camaraderie. And when I mean by success, it's not monetary success. They just want to be good at something, and they want people to be respect them,
Respectful,
to be
yeah. I
good at
mean,
something. So they could be bringing up their kids. I mean, that's a sign of success. So the modern issue is about actually making sure that men have as much choice and options to apply that. So that means making sure they're in work, not being talked down to, that if they are struggling with issues, that actually that there's those options available to them to actually get help. It's that kind of strength based. It's good to get help. Take control of your life, etc. So the modern masculinity is more about making sure that there's wider opportunities to apply it. Somebody said, one of the colleagues I work with, is building a new script for men and boys, especially because lots of jobs are going, AI is a problem,
yes,
manufacturing still
yes, yes,
on
yes.
on the downturn, and also that women have had a new script given to them, and they've earned it and worked for it. They can be anything they wish to be, which is obviously a great thing. So the challenge is about what the new script is for men, and my issue is that it's a new script, but the bigger issue is that we need a bigger stage.
Well, I think also, though, I like you just said, that the single mum, I was on my own with 4 children, and I had, well, only because I left him because he was abusive. But
Mm,
yeah, I was mum and dad, and it's hard work. And
yeah,
I was thrown into that situation. I didn't want to be it. I like being a woman. I like being feminine. I like, when I go into schools, I say to the lads, what do you think is masculinity? And they all seem to think it's about being bolshy, shouting at people, swearing, being arrogant. And I said, no. I said, real men are actually strong without having to show it. And they're protective, they're kind. And that's not to do with, you might think, oh, that's weak. It's not weak. The strength is something you see and experience as a woman, and you feel like someone's like almost got their arms around you to protect you. And I like that feeling. I like being a woman. I wouldn't want to be a man. I think a lot of women, dare I say it, I'm going to get a lot of bad press after this, but I think a lot of women have emasculated men. I think the women's lib movement did an awful lot of damage for men. I mean, my 3 daughter-in-laws will all do jobs in the house that I know my boys can do. And why do you do it? Oh, because I can. I go, but what role has he got?
Yeah.
What role? And I also think as well, and again, something that I have to say in schools, people are not teaching respect in schools. It's all about consent. And they're not teaching respect. And I think it's so sad. I wish I could do a thing on this. I don't think there should be the battle of the sexes. For goodness sake, we are different. Maybe I don't know. I just, somebody will say, oh, we're all the same. We're not all the same. Men have a role. And I think men have somehow got lost because they don't know how they should be anymore. And I think that puts the pressure on them mentally. And I think it's really, really sad, because the other thing, and I've got to get this in, is how do you feel? I know how I feel. How do you feel about the boys in schools now being put into misogyny classes?
Well, I'm not happy at all. I mean, but also, I mean, the problem is the language, because they're not necessarily being put into misogyny classes. I mean, this is a difference between what's the reality and then the political language around this, because, and saw that with the launch of the Vogue strategy, is because and the political world's struggling to find the right language. Obviously, people like myself are trying to help them, and also with the other parties, is that, and we're quite challenging about this, is the fact that there was a lot of great progress in 2025 around coming out of adolescence, which I'll come on to, around the change in the narrative. And I've encapsulated it by saying the narrative changed from the problems that men and boys cause to the problems that men and boys have. And if you sort the problems that men and boys have, you will sort the problems that a minority of them cause others. But the focus has to be dealing with the problems they have. And adolescence was really useful, but it wasn't by intention, because adolescence was very demonizing and pejorative of not only teenage boys, but also schools as well, but also working class men. I mean, I felt the portrayal of the dad was just abysmal. That, here's a guy working from 6 to 8 at night to make sure that the lights are on at home for his family, and that he was kind of demonized as actually that being a wrong. And he was the cause of his teenage boy's problem because he took his eye off the ball, etc. And it's like, no, this guy's doing the best he can. If you've got a problem, he's not the problem. It's the society and the world around him. And the same with the teenage boy. So after it came out and there was all this moral panic, and there was people on about toxic masculinity, and I'd written a paper, a joint paper with a higher education policy institute on boys, which was not going to university, which was useful because it meant I had something additional to put into the spotlight. And it meant I was doing a lot of TV, radio, and there were some great women also pushing back against this narrative. And after about a week, everybody was sort of like on our side and on young men and boys' side, saying, no, this is a wrong lens. Young men and boys aren't a problem. It's the society that they're in is the problem.
Yeah.
So, and it's not all young men and boys, it's some who have these problems. So there'd been a lot of great work, and then the government had done a big men and boys reception on 10 Downing Street, International Men's Day, which I'm part of, and then they kind of undone a lot of it, and there was a lot of people upset, men and women, in the men and boys sector when they came out with a new VALD strategy, which is vitally important, and then said, oh, we're going to teach boys like something out Clockwork Orange, are going to sit there with their eyes prized open, and watch videos telling them not to be misogynists, on the default position that they're all misogynist by nature. But the reality is that there are organisations going in the schools talking about masculinity and issues. I have concerns about their lens, that actually they're only really, they see all boys as a problem to be fixed, that they're not inspiring boys, that they're talking down and at them, not talking with them.
I think if I interject here, having gone into schools, and I was a teacher, I see a lot of middle-aged menopausal women who are just clicking away on their heels in the schools, waiting for their retirement, who just don't understand boys. They don't understand.
Well, you can say that. I won't. I mean, but the issue, but a couple of the issues is of course that like what's the impact on boys? Because a lot of boys that come at saying the world's against us, etc. And then when you see adolescents saying, well, yeah, you're all a problem, and then when you see a government making an announcement, really undoing some of the work they've done, saying you are a problem, you're misogynists, you're all addicted to Andrew Tate and Manosphere.
Oh, you see, he's got a lot
of actually understanding the impact that has on the teenage boys when they're seeing that, especially when they've got problems themselves. Now, the problems, spoke about the kind of being in abusive relationships. They might have mental health problems. They may have body image problems. They may have issues, dysfunctional families and communities around them, and also just a lack of jobs and opportunity and positivity and inspiration in their lives. So, you've got to fix those. You've got to fix those problems, and if you fix those problems, you will deal with some of the problems that some young men and boys cause. And I've gone on where people said, oh, masculinity, male privilege, patriarchy is having an impact on young men and boys, and I'm saying, well, you can argue about that, and I've said they're quite Marxist constructions of life, but putting that aside, I said, but can't we just get boys better educated? Can't we make sure that they can learn a skill, and can't we just make sure that they've got a job so that they can move on in their life, that they can see the future of actually being able to own their own home, to have a car, to basically have enough money to move out and bring up a family and get married or whatever they want to do. So you've got to give boys hope, and also then pathway on how to get there. If you keep telling them that they're a problem, then actually it becomes self-fulfilling, especially when the evidence doesn't stack up.
I always say that. I've always said to my own kids, and I say it at the end of every show, and you are doing this, you're giving people hope. If you take people's hope away, it might be the only thing that they've got left. And, hope is just so important that you hang on to it. And I totally agree with what you're saying. And I think boys, I do really, truly do feel sorry for boys today. I mean, do you see also, and this is another little theory I've got before we have to wind up, because someone in my ear is going to say to me, oh, a minute, you've gone on. But I have this feeling that there's not enough support for men when they become dads. And I think it's a massive change. So you've had this woman in your life and everything's hunky-dory and you're all loved up and you're making this baby, and then baby comes along and mummy is definitely going to change because she's carried a human being for 9 months and pushed it out or had it pulled out. And where does that man, I just feel, I might be wrong, but I feel new dads, because we need dads, and we need dads. There's a reason why we have mums and dads, and we need them to be, especially if you've got a boy, be good mentors and role models for their sons. And you know, I don't. Do you see any of that come your way at all, though, with that new dad struggling?
Well, I think there's better recognition, and there's a massive campaign about improving paternity pay, parental leave, shared parental leave.
Yes, there is,
especially for new dad. But there's a lot of talk, but there isn't any action at the minute. But there's a lot of pressure on the current government to make some changes on that, which is really good. But I think especially around the kind of postnatal period, and actually around the period, it's I hear from dads. I'm not a dad, but I hear from a lot of dads about the issues where they're seen as second-class citizens when around where the birth is. It's and also but also in the postnatal, they're not invited to maternity classes, and they're just seen as actually just an add-on, and the focus is all on the women, which includes in work. I mean, employers, it's always interesting where even women are expecting. I see it when I was, a number of the organisations I was working at, even female colleagues were expecting other colleagues to be taking on these kind of maternal roles, not the husband sharing it. They had all these gender stereotypes as well, so it's not just like men having them. And also there's some research from Swansea that came out last year, Swansea University, that shows actually there's a significant suicide risk, a far higher suicide risk with new dads than dads and non-dads, and so it's a suicide risk as well. And I don't think there's enough focus within the health system and society in general about what it means to be a new dad.
I think I'm glad because that's my theory. I'm glad you've supported what I'm thinking, because I think also men go back to work very quickly. You might have 2 weeks paternity leave.
Yeah.
If you've got a baby that's screaming all night and you can't sleep, and you've got because people are tending to be older when they have children now, so the man most likely has a more important job or higher rating, high pay scale, more responsibility, and he's been up half the night with a screaming child, and that's 7 days out of 7, and he's got to go and sit at a spreadsheet and work out all these figures, and he's absolutely, I mean, it is, to be fair, a baby crying, it is, and having no sleep is torture. It really is.
Well, yeah, no,
honestly, they should have thought of that in the war, because they did, didn't they? They made you stay awake, didn't they? Or that was one of the tortures that they did.
Exactly, but also there's the issue on the mother. So if the mother's had a difficult birth, or there's issues with the child, that puts huge pressure on the men as well, because obviously the man, if he's got if his partner is ill because of the birth is difficult, etc., he doesn't want to go to work because he wants to look after his partner and also the child. And it's my wife's had, because I remember speaking to someone, the wife had a very difficult birth, cesarean, lost a lot of blood, awful. And he was within 2 weeks, he was being forced to go back to work. When his thing, he's I don't want to go to work because I need to look after my wife, to make sure she's well. And as part of that, I've also got to look after the baby because she's really unwell. But I'm being forced to go to work, and he said it was an absolute nightmare. And he said he was lucky that he had her and his parents were still around, so they kind of stepped in, and the grandmothers straight in, helping, whatever, which is the maternal instinct never goes away. but he said it just put a lot of pressure on him because he was being forced to go to work and he didn't want to. He had serious family issues to deal with.
Yeah, it's terrible. Mark, I'm going to have to wrap this up. I could talk to you for hours. I found it absolutely fascinating. Do you have a donate button on Mankind? I'd love people to stick some money in the pot.
Yes, if you go on mankind.org.uk, there's a donate button.
Perfect.
And just to say, all the money raised is directly goes to our helpline. So that money will be there to help save men's lives.
Well, I have so looked forward to this day having you on, because we booked it a while back, and I'm so looking forward to it, because you are, as I always end my shows, you are giving men hope. So you guys out there, you don't need to feel isolated. You don't need to feel embarrassed. Come out the dark shadows and come forward and contact Mark and his organization, or you can contact me and I'll put you in my, but there is hope and help out there. So don't stay isolated. Thank you. 1,000 thanks, Mark. Thank you so much for your time. And I wish you well and have a good day. Thank you.
Brilliant. Absolute pleasure. Thank you very much.
Well, there we go. The lovely Mark Brooks, from the chairman of Mankind. So please have a look at his website and have a look. So I thank you for listening, and please go to the archive if you've missed this show when it comes out. And so we've ended on hope again, which is great. And next week, I am having a lovely lady on called Professor Melanie Lang. And she is in charge of all the research to do with all various kinds of abuse in sport, and that's globally. So we thank Mark again. You guys have a great day, and thank you. This is Marilyn Hawes with Unprecedented TV, with Heart and Soul. Thank you.